Anywhere you want.
Okay, I'll be in the
When the
circle of
tomatoes
terror. So my name's Brandon Durst. I'm running for state superintendent. I appreciate Chairman Regan's invitation to come and speak to all of you this evening and hopefully be able to hear some of your questions and thoughts as well. I'm running for state superintendent, and I want to start off with a disclaimer. As Representative Mendive is well aware, I served in the legislature, but when I was in the legislature, I wasn't one of you. I was on a different team. And so you're saying, why are you here? They have their meetings some other time during the week, and it's in a much smaller room with many less people. The reason I'm here is because, as Representative Mendive can also attest to, when I was in the legislature, I was very, very conservative. And like many of you have heard about, President Trump had talked about the walkaway movement. How many of you guys have heard of that? So I am a living, breathing example of the walkaway movement. Thank you. So I had 100% pro-life voting record, which automatically makes me not a Democrat. I'm an evangelical Christian, which automatically makes me not a Christian. And I believe that people of faith and liberty should be protected. So that automatically makes me not a Democrat. So here I am. And why am I running for state superintendent? So I served on the education committee for the entire time I served in the legislature. I was elected twice to the House and once to the state Senate. And I worked on a lot of legislation that actually had some pretty positive impacts. There's a program called Advanced Opportunities. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It allows students to get college credit while they're in high school or advance through the system more quickly. We're the only state in the country that created a scholarship program in the middle of the recession by reducing the cost of education and allowing students to use their own ingenuity to be able to advance themselves through school. That's called releasing barriers and giving kids the opportunity to use their own intellect and their own gumption to get things done. And we all know that that's a recipe for success. I'm running for state superintendent this year, and the election's not until May of next year, so I'm here early because of two reasons. Number one, because I'm in North Idaho in particular, and I'm in Kootenai County in particular, because I believe this area matters, and I know that it's oftentimes ignored by people in the southern part of the state. And I want to make it clear that this area is a priority to me, and that if I get the honor of serving as your state superintendent, that I will spend a lot of time in North Idaho listening to your concerns and being available to you. This won't be a position where I just sit in a building in Boise and forget that you exist except for in May of every 4 years. So I think that's wrong. The other reason I'm here is because I thought the last year exposed some real serious issues that have existed for quite some time actually in our education system, but they were brought to a head. And in particular, I think we've seen what happens when parents are cut away from their children's educations. When parents are basically told that they're not needed when it comes to the education of their children. And so I believe that we need to put in place a new superintendent who will prioritize and who will place parents at the pinnacle of education for their children, because at the end of the day, when things fall apart or things go well, it is the parent who is there to pick up the pieces or to put the child on their shoulders and tell them congratulations. That is who is there. And that's not a matter of being anti-educator or anti-school. That is just a fact of the matter, that the foundational principles of our family and of our society is the family and it is the parent. And so I think we need to do some things to be able to change that and change the dynamic around who gets to be in charge of education. We've heard of things like Common Core. By the way, always opposed to Common Core since the time it started. Why? Because I think it creates a barrier between parents and their student. There can be good things about it. I don't care if there's a barrier. If anything creates a barrier between parents and their students' education, I have a problem with it. Many of you have heard about the issues around critical race theory. Again, right, another thing where parents' values are being interceded upon or interposed by another set of values. I think that's a problem. I believe we need to have money follow students to whatever school of choice they want to go to. pie in the eye idea. This isn't just some abstract thing. House Bill 62, you can look it up if you know how to get to the legislature's website. The Empower Parents in Education Act rewrites the entire funding formula for the state of Idaho, which, by the way, is really messed up. There's huge disparities. Did you know back where I'm from, the Boise School District gets $3,000 more per student than any other school district in the surrounding school districts in both Kane and Ada County. Tell me why Boise needs $3,000 more per student than any other school district. They don't. But that's the system that we've got right now. There's a lot of inequities, there's a lot of disparities, and it's hurting kids, and it's not fair to the taxpayers in this part of the state or any other part of the state. So that needs to change. House Bill 62 creates a new program. It also allows, like I said, money to follow kids to any school they choose to go to. You want to send your child to a parochial education? Go for it. We got rid of that issue. We got rid of our Blaine Amendment under the Supreme Court last year, which was fantastic. You want to send your child to a PAWS system? Go ahead and do that. You want to continue to keep your child in your local public school? Great, do that too. At the end of the day, it's your choice as the parent. And I think we have to be able to finally have someone who stands up and says, this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to be really quick and just explain. Some of you might not understand exactly what the state superintendent of public instruction does, and that's okay because it's a bit convoluted. So let me kind of give you a quick primer on what it does. They do three things. They have three primary roles. The first is they oversee the Department of Education. Okay, the Department of Education does credentialing for superintendents and administrators and teachers, and they also do professional development. Some of the federal programs go through the Department of Ed, so they oversee all that, right? And then they also have a seat on the State Board of Education, which actually is the group that actually has the authority when it comes to education in the state of Idaho. That's represented by appointees by the governor and the state superintendent. So you got a few unelected folks making decisions, and then one state superintendent. I think that needs to change, by the way. I think that should be elected on a regional basis, so every district part of the state gets that's their say on the state board, but that's another piece of conversation for another time. And the state board also writes all the rules. Did you know that tomorrow, literally tomorrow, if the state board wanted to, they could end Common Core? Tomorrow. It was created by administrative rule. It can be ended by administrative rule. All it takes is for them to notice that this is an issue on their agenda, and we're going to strike it. They could end all critical race theory tomorrow by board rule.
How do we get rid of it?
You don't. That's the problem. We have to change the law. Well, that's part of it. They also serve terms that go beyond the governor's term. So you would have to change the law that says we need to elect our state board of education, which is absolutely what we should do, in my opinion. But we could end those things tomorrow. Literally, we could end them tomorrow. We have to have someone who's. So what am I going to do? What would I do? Practically speaking, if I was on the State Board of Education tomorrow, I would put a motion in, and I would say, I'd like to move the revision of this section of Idaho administrative rules and get rid of this thing, and I would add this section related to critical race theory and make it prohibited. And when you have the only person that's on that board that's elected statewide, making their voice known on behalf of the people that elected them, that comes with a lot of clout and a lot of publicity, and then power gets to the people where it belongs, and they actually get to have their voices heard in a decision-making body that's impacting all of your children, your grandchildren, and the people of our community. So, the fun thing that they do that's kind of strange is the superintendent also sits on the state land board as well. And the reason for that is because the land board actually is in charge of managing our endowment lands, and a lot of the endowment lands go to pay for public ed. So they have a seat there. That's kind of the nexus. They sit there and they try to help figure out how we're going to best manage our public lands for the benefit of public schools. So based off of what I've explained, it should be clear that while being a classroom teacher is a great thing, it does not prepare someone for the job of state superintendent. The job is too big. It's a policy job, it's a management job, and having someone with the background like I've got would be very useful. You also have to have somebody who's willing to stand up and take arrows in the back and knives in the chest. I can tell you, when I voted against honor care in 2013, as the only Democrat to vote against that, I got plenty of those. When I voted for conscience protections for pharmacists and doctors and nurses in 2010, as the only Democrat to vote for that, I got a lot of those. Why do I point that out? I point that out because I have a history of taking tough stands and being willing to face up to pressure from people that could hurt me politically and in a lot of other ways professionally, and still do it because it was the right thing to do. And that's what it's going to take. Because these folks, they work together, and they're chummy, and they don't want to, it's a pat you on the back, and we're going to work together. Folks, that time is over. I'm not saying we shouldn't be collaborative, but I'm telling you, it's time for us to put our foot down and say we're tired of it, and we need some change. We need to find somebody who's going to be a fighter for our kids. So I'll stop it there. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
Are you going to be running against Sherry, or is she not going to run?
My presumption is, I'm assuming she's running, but
how do you tell?
So my inclination is she's running because she's once me and another candidate who, by the way, was the former chair of the state board, announced. She's gotten a lot more active on social media. She's gotten out of the Capitol building a little bit. She's been sending out lots of press releases. So my presumption is she's running because she's actually starting to pop her head up. Yeah. Yes, sir.
When you have teachers that have tenure and you have administrators that are complicit in the indoctrination things that you're talking about, how are you going to enforce the changes that we're talking about?
So I think in my experience, it's a great question. So for those of you who didn't hear, the question was, how do you basically root out when we've got tenured faculty within our K-12 system and there's critical race theory or any kind of indoctrination happening, and the administrators are complicit in it, how do you stop that? In my experience, the thing that education responds to most is money, right? And if you take the money away from them, because if you as a parent says, fine, you can continue to do that, but my kid's going someplace else, then they have the choice to make, right? The school then has a choice to make. Do they want to continue to promote this person who's doing things that are counter to the wishes of their patrons? They can, but they're going to do it at their own peril. You have to put the power in the hands of the parent to force that change. And it's a market principle, right? The money leaves. Either you innovate and you change, or you die, or you become less of what you were. So that's my opinion. I think that's how you have to get it done. Yes.
So I hear you say that you've taken a lot of arrows. Do you know that by making the stand that you're making, the union, the Coeur d'Alene, Idaho State Education, the union is going to come after you and put money, and so are you strong enough to deal with that? Because that's tough.
Yeah, so it's a great question. The question is, how do I handle the union knowing that I've said what I've just said? And so the response is that I've dealt with it before. It won't be the first time. It was a different organization. I mean, I've had AACI joke all over me before. Those of you that don't know, that's the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry, a large lobbying group in Idaho. They've spent, in one of my campaigns, they spent over $100,000 to try to get me defeated in a small legislative race. So these shoulders aren't very broad. But let me just kind of make this, I'm gonna preach for a second. I'm a licensed pastor, so I'm gonna go to where I believe my strength comes from, which is from the Lord. And so I'm gonna be in prayer every single day that the Lord would protect me, and He would give me the strength that I need to have to be able to continue to fight for what I believe He's convicted me to do. And that's the only way I can do it.
You should win.
Last question.
Yes, Ron?
Are you familiar with House Bill 294?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
You've already said that you support parental choice in education. So if you are elected, will you, and we got that through the House,
Yeah.
with the 2/3 majority that died in the Senate.
Correct.
Okay. Would you actively support that legislation if it were to come?
Yes, so when that bill, so House Bill 294 that Representative Mendive is referring to was an ESA, it was called Strong Parents, Strong Students,
Strong Families.
Strong Families, yes. And it was an ESA program, which ESA stands for Education Savings Account, which my bill, by the way, is an ESA as well. Slightly different approaches to how we fund those things, but I would support 294. Here's the issue I think we saw. When 294 got to the Senate Education Committee, it did not fare well. I think that's putting it charitably. And the reason I think that happened is because whenever Ed Inc., what I call Ed Inc. is the school boards, the administrators, and the IEA, when they link arms, they're impossible to stop. That they are a very formidable force. And so I believe the only way that we stop them from being able to link arms is we get them to start looking at each other and figuring out how we're going to stop them. I talked about how my bill changes the funding formula. When you start talking to school districts, I was at Payette County last week or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember, I've done a lot of campaigning. And I was at the Payette Apple Blossom Festival. And I had a teacher from the West Ada School District, highly unionized district, they had to sit out all the nonsense that happened last year. And she came and she started interrogating me, which was great, because I did speech and debate in college on scholarship, so I love that stuff, right? But she started asking me all these questions, and she said, I said, did you know that your district gets $3,000 less per student than the kids across the street in the Boise School District? She said, well, that's because they have high property taxes. I said, I'm not talking about property taxes. I'm talking about state appropriation. You want to add on the property taxes that Boise gets levied to, it's another $5,000 more they get per student. I said, why are your kids worth $8,000 less per student, or $3,000 on a state appropriation, than the kids that live across the street? Tell me why. I said, is there anything that much different than them? She said, well, no. I said, that's what we have to do. We have to figure out a way to make this more equitable for your students, right? And she stopped, and she was a first-year teacher, and she had complained. She said, you know, I had COVID really bad, and it was really traumatic. I said, you should have an option to not teach or teach remotely. That should have been an option to you. But what ended up happening was, she said, wow, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but you're persuading me. And here's why that's important, I think, Ron, is because if we can do that statewide, and we can start talking to those individual districts and say, this is how your district benefits, then that locking of arms doesn't happen. And getting things through that Senate Education Committee, and you know Senator Thane he and I are very close, who's the chairman of that committee, then we can get something done. But if they're connected, if Ed Inc's connected, ain't nothing getting done. So, anyway, thank you for your hospitality. Let me let you know I have some cards out there. If you want to grab them, get some more information about me, it has a phone number on it, which actually will ring directly to me, because I believe that you should talk to your candidates directly if you have a question. So feel free to grab one. I'll hang around until after your meeting is over.
One last question.
Uh-oh.
2020 presidential election, who'd you vote for?
I voted for the Republican ticket, of course, President Trump and Vice President Pence. And
Thank you for your
you're
time.
welcome. Thank you.